Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Rob Lewis, Austin Price, and Jesse Summerton. I'm Brent Hubbs. Lots to talk about today. Obviously, Tennessee is an 0-2 football team, but guys, an 0-2 football team that clearly has their quarterback in the eyes of Jeremy Pruitt. What do you make out of Jeremy Pruitt's pretty staunch defense of his quarterback after 2 weeks of play?
I think he knows he doesn't have much behind him.
I was going to say, I think he knows he's got two freshmen and never taken a snap, and neither one of them are Trevor Lawrence 2.0.
He doesn't have an option. We've been saying that for months. I mean, Pruitt said it explicitly on Monday that, if you've been in and around this program the last, half a year, number two is their best option. Now, number two is not playing well at all right now, and if Tennessee has any hope of climbing out of this giant sinkhole, then they need Jarrett Garantano to play, a hell of a lot better. But it's the fans kind of hoping or thinking that Brian Maurer or Shroud is going to be some savior. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it was interesting. At the quarterback club on Monday, Pruitt was asked specifically about the backup quarterbacks, wanting to know what are their strengths. And he said, JT Shroud, he'll go out on the practice field, and about 75% of the time it'll be good. He's got a big arm. You like what he does. And then there's about 25% of the time you're just like, you can't do that. I mean, that's not, you can't play that way. You can't do those things. And he said in Brian Maurer, good athlete, guy who's fearless. As we saw, as he grabbed his helmet, went to run on the field. He was going to play when the BYU kid threw the shoe, but he said, he's never had to read the field before defensively, never had to do protections before. He's just kind of gone out and run around and played, which is hard to do. And I think the defense of Jerry Garantano is, one, you don't want to lose him mentally, and B, I think it's more you don't want to lose him mentally because you don't have any other options behind him. I think that was pretty clear. So the question becomes, if you're Jim Chaney and Chris Weinke, what do you do to get Jared right? Look, this is a guy who, he took a lot of hits last year, but he didn't put the ball up in harm's way. He didn't throw many interceptions.
He was risk averse. That's how he was risk averse. I mean, he took some sacks that were unnecessary because he does not particularly feel the game or see the field, but he was mostly accurate and he was risk averse. And now it is. Jeremy Pruitt said on the coaches show, Rob and I were talking about it before, and I had it in my piece. Jeremy Pruitt on the coaches show Sunday said that ball should have been an interception. We got lucky there. That one should have been picked off. We're fortunate that wasn't a turnover right there. 3 times. And Garantano actually did throw an interception. So, he's, especially down in the red zone, has been particularly errant. It's a bizarre regression from a guy that had generated so much buzz.
You want your quarterback to be locked in, just not locked in on a receiver. To me, it's how do you feel like he's taking a step back? Because it really does feel like this is the JG from 2 years ago when at the tail end of the Butch regime, he's playing against South Carolina and making some of those type throws.
I don't have any. I don't know why it's that way. He clearly does not feel comfortable.
When the pockets have actually been better this year on the whole.
Yeah, the offensive line has been better.
Yeah. But then again, they've not played an SEC team yet.
Right, they've not played Florida off the edge.
They've not played an NFL
Georgia
defensive lineman,
right?
Like they'll see every week.
But that makes it even more concerning.
No question. But here's the thing too. What BYU was doing is they dropped 8 in coverage and they said figure it out. And he had a hard time figuring it out. He missed open guys. I don't understand why it's that way. The reality is the resume on tape, if you will, through 8 quarters is this is where he's at. So if you're Jim Chaney, how do you fix it?
Well, another bizarre thing, and I've been tracking this since last season, had it last week, we'll have it in the PFF stuff. Again, he's been bad, and it's bizarre on Saturday because they ran the ball so well. But he was bad again on play action. He was just inaccurate, was not nearly as good. And you would think prior to that Vanderbilt game, that had been his strength because the windows are much easier to read. It's one progression, it's very simplified. But if he's not doing well there, and he already, his numbers take a dip anyways when it's just a standard 3-step or 5-step drop. I don't know what Chaney is going to be able to unlock here.
It feels like they almost, Rob, have to take the middle of the field away from him, which is impossible to play.
Which is what they did on Saturday at the end of the
right.
End
Well,
of
they
the first half.
they took the air out of the, but they took the ball away from him to a large degree. But I mean, he's getting himself in the most trouble. It seems like between the hash marks.
I mean, the interception was just mind-boggling. I mean, to be playing on campus for 4 years, playing your third year as a starter, and to not have any more awareness than to make that throw. I mean, I still don't know what he was doing. And then the two that resulted in touchdowns, down in the red zone, both could have been intercepted. I mean, Juwan Jennings makes 2 phenomenal plays on the ball,
Well, then they nearly almost don't even get to kick the field goal in double overtime, which was another one Pruitt talked about, which was when he just heaved it up into the middle with 3 guys around DWA. And DWA basically played
Callaway
defense.
was open.
Yeah,
When
and
Callaway was open to the top of
DWA
the field.
basically played defense to make sure that it wasn't an interception.
Well, and I mean, the touchdown to Juwan Jennings, the first one on 4th and 3, he wasn't even throwing. That's not where he was trying to. I don't know. I guess he was trying to go to DWA.
But that ball was a bad ball even then.
And it was behind him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, BYU defenders got their hands on both of his touchdown passes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they
were hardly clean.
Which again goes back to, and I don't know the answer to it. And Jim Chaney, that's why he makes $1.5 million. How do you fix him? Do you roll him out and take half the field away? Do you do check with me at the line of scrimmage and he tells you basically where to throw the football based on defensive alignment?
You watch Campbell County play Gibbs a lot, kind of like Campbell County does. They get to the line, they look at oversee it.
Well, it's what Randy Sanders did with Eric Ainge and Brent Schaefer for basically the entire year in 04. I don't know what the answer is. I just don't think you can continue to do what you're doing right now. I get he doesn't have anybody behind him, but I don't see how you can sit there and put a game plan together where you got a lot of trust in him making throws when, with the game on the line in the second half, you took the ball out of his hands as much as you could and said run the football. And here's the thing about that. It's great they ran for 200 yards. I mean, it's really good. But as Pruitt said this week, in the quarterback club, the way BYU lined up, you should be able to run the ball effectively. It's why Utah ran for 300 yards against them. That's fool's gold if you think Tennessee suddenly got a run game going against SEC teams with speed at linebacker who's not going to give you the edge.
They're not going to do that. Most SEC teams aren't going to play a 3-3-5 and line up their 3 guys in between basically the guards and then have their linebackers tucked in too. I mean, I don't know how Tennessee just didn't continue to run off tackle even more than they did. I mean, they got gimmicky where BYU basically dared them to do that end around on 4th and foot, and they obliged and blew up the play. But I mean, the offensive line played better, but it's a lot of that was just kind of the scheme that BYU was running.
Yeah, I mean, it's better from the standpoint of the last couple of years they could not have done what they did Saturday. Kind of even like with the pass protection stuff. Even the teams like North Texas or whoever was able to get pressure on the quarterbacks, whether that was Dormandy, whether that was JG. They've been able to get home, and the pockets have been not very good, even against bad football teams. So to me, that's the one progress you see. But I mean, it is very concerning when you look at what you've got coming up in 2 weeks. I mean, Florida's going to come off the edge, and they're going to be able to get home with 4 guys and drop the back 7.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of doubt about that based on kind of what we've seen in the past, unless this offensive line really continues to grow. Those tackles have not been tested yet with an edge guy who's a good edge guy. As you mentioned, Rob, they haven't played an NFL defensive lineman yet. With that being said, did Tennessee find 4 of their 5 on the offensive line on Saturday? Is right guard the only place where they don't know who their right guard is? Do you think that Marcus Tatum's the right tackle, Kennedy's the center, Trey Smith's your left guard, Jameer Johnson is your left tackle, with Wanye being the first guy off the bench outside of the right guard position?
That's probably accurate, although I will say that we say they don't know who their right guard is. They lament maybe behind the scenes about one guy or another, but Ryan Johnson continues to get the lion's share of reps there. I mean, Riley Locklear, I think, only played 25 or so snaps. Ryan Johnson still got the bulk of the work there. So I mean, are they going to give Calvert a look? I don't think. It doesn't seem like it. If he hadn't played the first 2 weeks. Carvin clearly is out of the rotation. They did not like what they saw early on from Darnell Wright, pulled him fairly quickly. So I think it would be correct to say that perhaps they're settled in those other spots, but maybe they're settled with that. That's the 5 they're going with again on Saturday.
Well, let me ask this: if this is bad to say because of what happened in Week 1, if you can get to the point on Saturday where you want to move some things around, do you look at a Jameer Johnson this week at right guard? He played left guard a year ago. You know he's one of your more physical players. Are you better if you put him at right guard and put Wanya Morris at left tackle beside Trey, and that ends up becoming your 5? I guess what I'm asking is if you don't think Calvert's ready, which clearly they don't at this point, and you're not getting the production that you need to get out of Ryan Johnson and Riley Locklear at right guard, is that the next potential move? Is sliding Jameer Johnson back inside to play guard where he did play a year ago and survived and was one of your more physical guys? Look,
I think that is an option. I also think that I would probably start Locklear and let him play a bunch of snaps in a row and see how that goes, because he was actually better in Week 1 than most of the other linemen. I don't think Riley Locklear is he's not going to grade out as some All SEC guy. But I do think he gives you more upside than Ryan Johnson.
I agree. I would continue you hate to bounce people around, especially young guys, but I thought Darnell honestly looked the best he ever looked at guard down in Orlando. I honestly think that they should at least toy with, playing maybe him at some right guard during practice just to see if it works. What's the worst that can happen? You may find a niche there for him and he can get on the field faster. Not to say he can't move back out to tackle.
They don't have a lot to lose at this point. So.
Well, look, if you're going to figure it out, Rob, this is probably the last week you're going to get an opportunity to think about figuring it out. Yeah, look, you're 0-2. I don't want to sit here and say, anything in this world of college football with this team's a laydown. But if you're going to experiment any, or have hopes of experimenting any, it's going to be this week.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most critical offshoots of this last 2 weeks is you've not gotten a snap for a freshman quarterback. You don't want whoever that to be in Gainesville in the second quarter. JP or JG turns his ankle or something. I think not getting yourself in a position where you can really empty the bench in either of these first 2 games has been a blow.
Which is something that we noted that was going to be a concern, even if they had won. Now, if you sit 2-0, you're feeling a lot better. But when I kind of wrote in my preseason predictions, the idea of progress, wins and losses are what matters in the end. But if you're not blowing out bad teams, well, they're not even blowing them out. They're not even in a position that can be competitive at times, and then having to, whether it's those guys or even a guy like Jeremy Banks played 2 snaps on Saturday. Pruitt keeps talking about how much they need to build inside linebacker depth. He played 2 snaps. Chandler Reed didn't play.
How much better off would Roman Harrison be if he'd got to play the whole second half while they were thumping Georgia State? Or, same for Kavaris Crouch. Jeremy Banks.
Or how would you feel about Maurer or Shrout?
All those guys. Those guys. That's what you were hoping. That's what you expected and thought the first 2 games of the season were going to be about to speed up the growth of this football team. They obviously haven't been able to do that. So how much do you experiment this week? You say, well, they've got nothing to lose. You are a week away from getting ready for SEC play where you better be dialed in as best you can be dialed in with who you have. How much can you experiment this week versus we better get locked in who our best 6 or 7 are on the offensive line. We've experimented enough throughout the preseason and the first 2 games that we've lost. This is what we got to grow with through a brutal month of October that's quickly approaching.
We'll see. I kind of, Withrow and some other folks on Sunday were on Twitter harping for the youth movement and all that. The youth movement's already happening. It's already happening. You look at the snap count in Week 1 and Week 2. Pruitt is mostly playing the guys that he believes gives them the chance to win. Now, the offensive line, maybe that's notwithstanding because they've kind of yo-yoed Wanya to 2 positions. Darnell didn't play a lot on Saturday. But I think, Henry T is going to, whenever Batuli comes back, it's going to be Henry T and Batuli at inside linebacker.
Crouch is coming on.
Crouch played 30 snaps on Saturday.
Roman Harris didn't play in the opener. He's out there in the last series of the game.
DeAndre Johnson played 2 snaps.
Right.
The youth movement's here. Warren Burrell is playing, even though Warren Burrell doesn't have a lot of confidence. I just Pruitt's talking about the lack of experience in the roster and all that. I mean, they're playing what they have.
Well, I mean, when everybody says youth movement, what they're basically saying is play the backup quarterback. That's the youth movement that they're looking for, is change your quarterback, because they are playing youth everywhere else. That's just another way of saying bench JG. That's what people are looking for when they say that, because you're playing a freshman tailback, you're playing freshman offensive lineman. The only place you're
Keaton's playing a receiver.
Right. The only place you're not playing a freshman's at tight end. Outside of that, you're playing freshman at receiver, running back, offensive line, defensive line are all newcomers. Okay, maybe you're not playing Elijah Simmons, but they're all newcomers.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Freshman at linebacker, freshman, in the secondary with Warren Burrell. There's not, like you say, there's not anybody else to play really from a youth standpoint. Some guys will continue to come on, but you've seen who those guys are going to be this year.
Well, and you have to, and I noted this in a tweet. I mean, there has to be a balance that's you strike there too. I mean, Theo Jackson is a veteran who is playing better. Bumpus is a third-year player who is playing better. You get Austin Pope was the best tight end that Tennessee had on Saturday. It wasn't Dominique Wood Anderson.
Right.
It was Austin Pope.
He certainly blocked the best on the edge. Was he perfect every snap?
No.
But he was the best of
He was way more physical than DWA. So you're gonna continue to count on those guys too.
What do you do at safety? Is it Theo and Nigel, and you hope Flowers kind of gets going a little bit? Because Flowers is a guy who a year ago everybody was talking about, great ball skills, could find the ball. He was this, that, and the other. He's not progressing. He's not moving towards his ceiling as fast as you thought he would be. I mean, he didn't play very well in week 1, and he didn't play a whole lot at all in week 2.
No, he was only in dime packages on Saturday against BYU. They went with Theo and Nigel, which we expect when we had it in the war room on Thursday. We kind of heard some of those rumblings. I would see, because Tennessee's safeties are a bit interchangeable, I would give him some of Nigel's snaps on Saturday and see kind of how that Flowers-Theo combo works.
They need somebody in the back end to go get the ball in the air. You're talking about being ball hawking, to be in a position to make a play. That just doesn't feel like, they're either so far off the ball or they're late responding to something. It doesn't feel like that a safety's on the field very much. I mean, they don't make a play, I guess is what I'm saying.
To say, I haven't, other than Nigel whiffing on the 64-yard, when Chance had a chance to tackle the guy there, I don't know that I've noticed Nigel, the pass interference call against Georgia State, and I've not noticed Flowers at all in 2 games.
Yeah.
Well, other than when he was running down the 2 running lanes in Georgia State and ran the wrong way and got yanked. I mean, Flowers was not good.
No, I mean, he hasn't been. I mean, they need him. You're talking about youth movement. They need that guy to come on. They need a lot. They need a lot of guys.
Nigel's got 1 interception in his career.
Yeah,
I think you know what he is by now.
Yeah, he's not been around.
And another guy and we talked about this in the pod after week 1. It's early. He's a younger kid too. Hadn't played a ton of football. Basically was injured a lot last year. But I mean, Aubrey Solomon's been mostly invisible out there. To me.
Yeah.
I agree. Greg Emerson's been the best.
I would say Greg has been the most disruptive. He's been the most. They still, there's some consistency issues there in terms of down to down. I think also just basic conditioning. But I mean, one of the sacks that Bumpus had, and Bumpus has come on because Pruitt said it Monday. He practices the right way. He's bought into the system. That sack when he blew up the screen, Greg Emerson deserves like a half a sack or an assist for getting that, because he just destroyed the running back cutting up the field and allowed Bumpus a free release.
Well, a lot of that goes to not just what Emerson did on that particular play, but just leaving a kid at a set position and letting him figure it out, letting him learn. I mean, Bumpus was, a lot like Banks and some of these other guys that they've just. I mean, you talk about yo-yoing. I mean, those guys have yo-yoed like 4 times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot, man. I mean, like, remember when Phil did that with Anthony Anderson?
Receiver, DB.
Yeah, it was just kind of wherever we're thin at the time, and the kid never really was able to get anything done. I mean, it's kind of nice to see a kid that, has found his footing somewhere when he's gotten kind of yo-yoed back and forth.
Yeah, and he's completely bought in. I think there were times early in his career he was all about wanting to play tight end and wasn't
That's
interested.
natural, though,
Yeah, and once he started to buy into it, I think he and Tracy Rocker have. And look, the opportunity's been there for him. A year ago, Rocker was new, and he was trying to get Shy Tuttle, Kyle Phillips, and Alexis Johnson, and that was no offense. I'm not saying he didn't coach those other guys, but we were on the practice field, even in the limited time, even in individual periods. His focus was really on those three guys, and those guys got all the reps, and now they have to have Latrell Bumpus and some other guys come on, and they have. I mean, he has to some degree, and we'll see who else can come on with that. I mean, Darrell Middleton was a no-show on Saturday, but Emerson, as you mentioned, has found his footing to a degree. How much more can he go? Which gets me to this next question. Pruitt keeps talking about ceiling. A lot of improvement from week 1 to week 2. I think some of that improvement was a different focus from the coaching staff on an opponent from week 1 to week 2. I think they were more dialed in. Okay, I think week 1 was so much more about them and not as much about an opponent. And they had this idea they were going. I'm not saying they ignored Georgia State, never looked at the tape or whatever, but you could tell by who all they rotated and what they did. It was about them going into it instead of waiting till the game was in hand and then making it about them. It was about playing a bunch of guys and figuring out what you could do. Defensively, they were more aggressive in game 2, as Coach Pruitt talked about, etc. What is the ceiling for this team? Pruitt keeps talking about how high the ceiling is. How high is the ceiling right now?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about wins and losses, I mean, losses were like what their best game looks like. At this point, the way they botched these first 2 weeks, I don't think the ceiling for wins and losses. I mean, if they get to 6, they will have pulled off a couple of shockers.
Is the ceiling higher? Somebody puts this on social media on Twitter. Is the ceiling higher because they're so far down in the cellar through what they've done the first 2 games? Is the ceiling misleading for this team for this year?
There's no place to go but up.
I mean, I think at the floor is how they look against Georgia State. They can play a much, much better football game than that. No, does that mean they can win 6 games? I don't think so at this point. But I think
that's meaning you're going to win 4 in SEC play.
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems outlandish.
I feel like it's one of those ceilings in like Willy Wonka, where it's like an optical illusion. I mean, that was an odd quote that Pruitt. I mean, Pruitt was interesting on Monday because he was very optimistic and hopeful, and
you think that was to make sure he didn't lose his team?
Perhaps.
Lose his fan base?
Perhaps. Yeah, I mean, he said some strange things on Saturday that I think maybe irked the fan base. So, but yeah, maybe. But I kind of wonder how long that's going to last. It'll last through Chattanooga, but. Because then when you start playing SEC teams, I mean, Pruitt did say, because I even looked at near the end of all of his, we got it, we're going to get better, we're growing. Other teams are too, and Tennessee's 0-2 in a year. 2 weeks ago, fans had talked themselves into quite optimistically that this team could go 8-4 because the schedule was much more favorable. You play first 3 games at home. Well, now other than what in Jeremy Pruitt's tenure, what have they lost 5 or 6 home games already? Yeah. I mean, it's not good. You beat an FCS team in Charlotte and UNLV and Kentucky.
Beat Kentucky, yeah. But at the same time too, in the SEC East, Kentucky's lost their quarterback for the year. South Carolina's lost their quarterback for the year. The East, if Tennessee. It's ironic, if Tennessee had found a way to win Saturday night, then there would still be talk about 6, 7, because the way the East appears to be opening up. Vanderbilt's not very good.
Kentucky lost their quarterback.
South Carolina lost their quarterback. Tennessee fans, fans in the East, I mean, Georgia's looking over there going, I don't know that anybody's going to contest us in the Eastern Division.
Well, but I mean, but
the rest of the East seems to be opening up behind Georgia.
100%. But then that was the case a year ago, and Tennessee wasn't very good. Vanderbilt wasn't very good. South Carolina wasn't very good. And Tennessee still either struggled or did not win those games. And so it's the idea of hope and kind of it's a dark place. I mean, it's like it's kind of what happened Saturday night with a 99.6% chance win probability and then not win. I mean, it's like a Clockwork Orange deal. I mean, it's inexplicable.
So should fans focus more just on individuals getting better? If you're advising a fan, how do you handle the rest of the season?
Yeah,
You just focus on the individuals.
See
how far does Henry T come, and how far does Gray come in a year, and some of these other guys.
That's hard though, because I mean, like,
well, sure, you judge on wins and losses.
well, that and like, I mean, I guess if you're a fan, you're gonna stay home. If you're a fan and come to the game, I mean, how much are you really just paying attention to one guy and kind of rooting for his improvement? I mean, you're paying the money to come to those games. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know. I just think it's hard. At the end of the day, it's kind of like I've seen a couple people post after Georgia State, I was totally done with them, but by Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, you start working yourself up into a lather, and all of a sudden you're like, we're going to beat BYU, and that'll happen in 2 weeks. There'll be somebody that thinks they're going to beat Florida. Maybe that'll be me. Maybe I'll pick them this time. But my point is like, it's naturally going to happen where like you kind of work yourself up into a lather and think, the light bulb's finally going to come on. Well, this is going to be the week.
And that's why, to me, this question is impossible to answer, because Tennessee fans have been trying to answer this question for so long. And Saturday was such a missed opportunity, because even coming out of the Georgia State historic loss, if you beat BYU, which was not a very good team, it was an average football team. If you beat BYU, you would see lots of Tennessee fans kind of rally again and say, hey, all right, we're going to be 2-1 going to Gainesville. Maybe we figured some stuff out. You start, but you're 0. It's just the balloon popped. When that.
Well, and you had 90,000 plus in there. I mean, they showed up. I mean, those guys. I mean, for them to show up Saturday night and be as engaged,
loud and proud the whole time.
They were engaged. They didn't wait for the team to give them something to cheer for. They were there to support that team.
Play.
I mean, they were terrific. They keep coming back, and hats off to the Tennessee fan base for doing that. Will that happen at noon on Saturday against Chattanooga? I don't know.
Too hot.
We'll see how that one goes. But
they better hope the mocks fill up the stadium.
Lots of. It's interesting because clearly Pruitt's trying to sell the youth. We're getting better. We're on our way. Does he really believe that? I don't know. How much does he believe of that, knowing what's coming in October? We'll see. I don't think he could play it any other way today. Yeah, what are you going to come out or Monday? What are you going to come out and say Monday? We're awful.
Jesse kind of danced close to it a minute ago. But if they close that, if they just win that game, then Pruitt really can sell. We made a lot of improvement from week 1 to week 2 because they did.
Right.
I mean, part of that was because they were so terrible against Georgia State, but still against a much better team on both lines of scrimmage. They played much better up front on both sides. I mean, short yardage was an issue, but still. He could have generated a lot of optimism. Like, yes, it was, week 1 was terrible, but you could have sold it as an aberration, as opposed to now, you can't. You're just a bad football team.
So what does this football team do on Saturday? We'll find out about that. Recruiting-wise, big picture, again, kind of where things are. An interesting update from Harrison Bailey from the standpoint of right now it seems like that committed group is locked in, solid. Does that continue through October? We'll see. But right now, they appear to be communicating and staying, pretty close together.
Well, and at some point, you can only kind of go spiraling out of control on the field for so long before it does affect you in recruiting. But right now, it doesn't seem to be affecting them with guys they have committed. Now,
and that's the key phrase.
That's the key phrase. Now, how does it affect? Them
Eric Gilbert, who's back at Clemson,
or Noah Sewell, or Darnell Washington.
Who's at Oregon.
I think that,
sure.
That's
those are the ones that are going to be hard.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to me like, people have asked about Jahmyr Gibbs for several weeks now. The kid out of Dalton. Kid is running for 1 million yards a game.
Now he's a 21?
No, he's a 20. He's a 20.
And they offered him. They liked it. He was camp-tiered.
I watched him do his. Yeah. Jesse and I both watched him work out as a DB for DA. And I mean, like, I think he's a good player. And I just, to me, like, he's the kind of guy. He's exactly what you have, though. He's not a big back. I mean, if you're but if you're going, okay, T's our big back, then this is the kind of guy you want for a second tailback, because he does got some wiggle. He's got some shiftiness, and he's got, I think, some of the best vision I've seen of a running back in a while. I mean, if you watch his film, I mean, he's, he sees things extremely well. So,
but you'd have to flip him too.
Yeah, you'd have to flip him, from Georgia Tech. But I think it's gettable. I think that he likes Tennessee.
But you're going to have some success, and you're going to have to show some promise that you're going to be able that you're going in the right direction to flip a guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, like, to me, he's much more attainable because Dalton's just across the line.
Well, and you're flipping it. No offense to Georgia Tech, but they're in a full-blown rebuild.
There you go.
Coming out of the Paul Johnson system with a bunch of guys who don't fit them. They got some long days coming for them.
Yeah, they've got to find a way to get Barron in the boat, Hardy in the boat, Eason to not want to go play with his buddies. You know, to me, those are all key for this class because the likelihood is this team's not going to win enough to get some of the guys Jesse just talked about. So thus, the guys like Eason, Barron Hardy, Jahmyr Gibbs, so on and so forth. To me, they become more and more important.
Well, you need to have great evaluations because you're going to have to go. You got to go find some guys to win with to beat the big boys in the SEC that the big boys in the SEC didn't want. And that you know, we always have this debate: which comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, you got to have. You know, to recruit great players, you got to win. To win, you got to have great players.
Yeah.
So what's the compromise? Well, the compromise is you
overachieve,
get a guy,
which is what I've been saying.
Right, you get a guy that you've evaluated that Alabama's like, yeah, we like him, but we don't really have room for him. We can get better. But that guy becomes a guy that Alabama regrets not taking or Georgia regrets not taking. Maybe that's Roman Harrison in this class. It's what everybody's hoping for. You got to find enough of those in your evaluation because you're not going to line up and win out for Noah Sewell and Smalls and you know, Washington and those guys straight up right now being 0-2 and where you're at.
Yeah, which is what I mean. Tennessee needs Alontae Taylor to be that.
Yeah.
I mean, they need Wanye Morris to be that. I mean, those are guys that are teed up exactly what you're talking about. The Georgia and Alabama said, I mean, maybe, but. I mean, if you want to go to Tennessee, go to Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. So can those guys do that? I think it's funny on Gilbert. Everybody's like, 3 months ago, Clemson's not a factor yet. He just keeps sliding and right back over there going to see Clemson. And, Clemson thinks they're out. He just keeps going back and seeing Clemson. Obviously Clemson is not out, and they're a major factor.
But a lot of that, too, though, is Eric Gilbert goes there next year. He's sure to catch passes from Trevor Lawrence for 1 year. And then they've got the number one quarterback in the country committed to him, and who's doing a really good job of pitching to guys, not just Gilbert, but other playmakers, to come catch balls from me. Now I understand Harrison's his teammate, but I mean at the end of the day, Eric Gilbert's got to make the decision that's best for him.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. Everybody's talking about how Clemson was out of it, and you're like, ain't no way Clemson's completely out of that thing when it's all said and done. And he keeps going back over there, and Clemson's going to be a factor along with Alabama and Georgia and others, and Tennessee's fighting to hold on, to make sure
fighting to get an official
visit.
They're
fighting to make sure they can get an official visit at this point. So we'll continue to talk about recruiting, obviously coverage of this football team and this football game coming up this week. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. Hopefully we didn't get anybody drunk with the drinking game that the podcast has turned into. I tried to avoid some of my catchphrases today.
Is that a thing?
That's a thing on the message board.
People don't like that I refer to pieces that we've written and stuff. The podcast is free, folks. We got to drive people to the site.
That's right, and hopefully we didn't yawn too much for somebody today in the podcast.
I tried to cover my mic.
That's going to do it for this.
That was absolutely AP yawning the other day.
It was me.
1,000%.
It was me because I'd been to Oakmont and had like 3 hours sleep the night before.
Oh, poor you.
It will be interesting to see how it all plays out.
It will be interesting. Exactly right. There's one last shot for everybody. That's going to do it for this edition of the podcast. For Rob, Austin, and Jesse, I'm Brent. Have a great day, everybody.